Hello and welcome to This Really Happened, a place where unbelievable, heart-touching true stories come to life. Sometimes surprising, sometimes bittersweet, always real. Grab a drink and settle in. We're about to begin. The ringtone of the smartphone, sounding closer to noon on a most ordinary working Thursday, once again divided the woman's life into a happy period before and an almost hopeless one after. The familiar word "mom" lit up on the screen. Although calls in the middle of the day weren't a frequent occurrence, she didn't have any bad premonitions about it. What if? Maybe her mother missed her or wanted advice on choosing clothes. The woman put a pencil mark on the margin of the page with the client's contract draft and hurried to answer the call so as not to worry her loved one with a long wait. As soon as she heard her mother's voice, which sounded unusually muffled as it seemed to her, her heart sank somewhere down. It was obvious that something not at all joyful had happened, and the assumption, unfortunately, was confirmed. "Daughter, hello. Please don't worry too much. It just so happened that I'm in the hospital now." The woman became agitated. "Mum, what happened? Which hospital are you in? What are the doctors saying? What do I need to bring? What's the room number?" The voice from the receiver interrupted the stream of questions. "My dear, I beg you, don't worry. It turned out just like in a movie. I slipped, fell, almost lost consciousness. But everything is fine. The neighbour was passing by. She cheered me up and supported me while we waited for the ambulance. The doctor said everything will be fine, but I'll have to stay in the hospital for a little while." "Mom, why didn't you tell me sooner? I would have rushed over, helped." "I didn't want to bother you in the middle of your workday, but visiting hours are in the evening, from 4 to 7, and if you go home from the office first, then to the pharmacy, I was afraid you might not make it. Anyway, please write down what you need to bring here. The main thing is your insurance policy and a phone charger. Water too, non-carbonated, because for some reason I'm very thirsty." Invisible to the woman, her mother sighed, and she vividly imagined how her loved one's face was contorted with pain, and she hurried to end the conversation, clarifying the hospital and room number. The woman reread the list of everything her mother had dictated, added chicken broth and wet wipes to it, and, feeling weak-kneed, went to ask her boss for permission to leave. "Boss, may I please leave early today? I have personal circumstances. My mother is in the hospital." The boss, a friend of the woman's husband from their student years, expressed polite words of sympathy. Upon learning which hospital the subordinate's mother was in, he encouraged her and inquired, "The doctors in our regional hospital are good. Maybe the setting isn't too luxurious, but both the equipment and the staff are top-notch. I've been in this hospital several times, discharged feeling brand new. So everything will be fine. Don't despair. By the way, are you driving today or is your husband using the car? Maybe the driver can give you a ride." The woman was touched by her boss's concern and decided she wasn't in a position to refuse the offer. "Thank you, boss. That would be very helpful. I won't keep the driver long. I just need to stop by Mum's house and that's all. I won't keep the driver any longer. I'll gather the necessary things there and then I'll call a taxi. Thank you." The boss wished the woman good luck and promised, "Come out to the main entrance in 15 minutes. I'll tell the driver to wait for you at your mother's house and drop you off at your family nest with your husband. He has to come back for me anyway, and your house is on the way." Thanking the thoughtful boss again, the woman went to turn off her computer and tidy her workspace. She took the contract with her so as not to let the team down and to finish the necessary work by the next morning. The woman barely registered the meaning of the stories the driver tried to entertain her with, but she was even grateful that the flow of his speech forced her to react somehow and prevented her from sinking into anxious thoughts. Following the list, checking off each item, the woman gathered things in her mother's apartment. After watering her favourite flowers, she turned off the gas and water just in case, and checked if there was anything perishable in the refrigerator. After gathering the trash to throw away, she finally went downstairs and set off with the talkative driver. Not far from the woman and her husband's house was a supermarket with a pharmacy section inside, and she decided to stop there on the way. Asking the driver to stop near the container site, she threw out the collected trash and hurried in for groceries. Moving almost on autopilot, the woman bought everything she needed and was soon simultaneously preparing dinner for her husband and broth for her mother. While the food was cooking and baking, the woman called her husband and explained the situation. "Husband, Mum's in the hospital. I'm going to her. I don't know exactly how long I'll be there yet." "Dinner will be on the stove," the man admitted. "I know. The boss told me you needed support. Wait for me. I'll try to get home early and we'll go to the hospital together. You never know what else might be needed. This way I'll be on hand." The husband didn't let his wife down, and picking her up along with the 2 bags she had packed, drove her to the hospital. The woman managed to persuade the nurse receiving deliveries to let her see her mother and the attending physician, who, fortunately, was there. The husband waited for his wife in the lobby, but verbally sent kind words and wishes for a speedy recovery. Her mother tried to smile upon seeing her daughter enter the room, but it was noticeable that she was both uncomfortable and scared. The woman quietly but clearly greeted everyone in the room and went to her mother's bed. A weight was suspended from the unfortunate woman's right leg. Her lips, bitten almost to bleeding, clearly indicated that the victim of the icy conditions was in great pain. The woman listened to her mother's account of how she got into the predicament and, trying not to cry, began to unpack everything she had brought into the nightstand. The phone was immediately put on charge. She gave her mother the broth she had cooked and made her eat a few spoonfuls of raw, finely grated carrots. They say online that this kind of salad is the best vitamin remedy in the first few days after an injury. Then I'll give you some sour berry juice. That's healthy too. "Oh, my dear, don't worry. You should probably go. Your husband will come home. He'll probably be surprised you're not there." The daughter explained that her husband knew what had happened, had rushed home so she wouldn't have to take a taxi, that he wasn't allowed in, but he sent his regards. As if she had been waiting for this very remark, the woman lying on the neighbouring bed became animated. "The orderlies and nurses here are rude and boorish," she interjected. "You can't get hold of them day or night. They just drink tea and fawn over the doctors. Giving them chocolates or even money is useless. They still do their duties half-heartedly." The woman remained silent, and having found out her mother's attending physician's name and patronymic, went to look for him. The restless neighbour didn't miss the opportunity to remark here either. "If he's not in the doctor's lounge, check the dressing room. He's probably sweet-talking someone there." Thanking the grumbler dryly, she went out into the corridor. The nurses in traumatology, accustomed to all sorts of patients' relatives, tears and hysterics, looked at the visitor, asking how to find the doctor with a mixture of irritation and weariness. But one of them, who seemed like the head nurse, answered thoroughly. "The doctor is currently in the head of department's office, down that end of the corridor, the second to last door. You can wait there or sit here on the bench near the doctor's lounge." The woman waited for the doctor, and he, upon learning that she was the mother's daughter, invited her into the office. Showing the X-ray on the computer screen, the doctor explained, "If I can put it this way, your mother's fracture was a successful one. In general, There are 2 treatment options. The man began to explain the nuances of each method, then asked, "Which option have you decided on?" The woman looked the doctor in the eyes but didn't answer, instead asking a counter-question. "Tell me, doctor, for example, if a person very close to you had a fracture like my mother's, what would you recommend?" Smiling, the doctor answered briefly, "Osteosynthesis." In a very similar case with my aunt, our head of department performed a similar operation. She's been leading an active life again for a year now, even working in her garden. So I can't keep up with her. The woman clarified all the details of the upcoming surgery, wrote down what else needed to be brought for the post-operative period, and, saying goodbye to the doctor, left the office. She had to inform her mother that the surgery was scheduled for the very next day, and, composing herself, the woman presented it as lightly as possible, trying not to alarm her loved one. "I'll come by tomorrow. I'll meet you after the surgery. Everything will be fine. Don't worry." "My dear, what about your work? Your boss will probably be angry?" "Don't you worry about that. I'll get all the work done and won't let you or the boss down." With the surgery, the long journey for her mother to be able to walk again had only just begun. For 2 weeks, the daughter visited her almost daily to feed her and take care of her. The woman tried to object and repeatedly stated, "My dear, take care of yourself. Don't come to me so often. The food here is quite good, and I don't have much appetite anyway." "Where would it come from if I'm not expending any energy?" However, she couldn't persuade her daughter. When the day of discharge arrived, the woman went to the doctor for recommendations. The doctor was cautious and warned, "Your mother is a very energetic lady, but I've stated my point of view and I'll repeat it to you. I wouldn't be overly optimistic if I were you. But you don't need to despair either, although she absolutely cannot bear full weight on the injured limb. Crutches will be your mother's best friends for at least the next month, and she needs to be careful after that too. Moving is necessary, of course, but cautiously. Preventive treatment is indicated to prevent bed sores. I'll expect her back for a follow-up X-ray in 6 weeks to check the stage of bone fusion. That seems to be everything." The woman clarified, "Maybe some vitamins for Mum to take?" The doctor shrugged. "In principle, yes, but in general, they should tell you the rehabilitation plan at the local polyclinic." The woman called a special taxi specializing in transporting people with limited mobility, and after heroically navigating the access streets, her mother finally arrived back at her apartment. A new problem arose for the daughter. Her mother's physical condition still left much to be desired. Even a simple trip to the bathroom or kitchen could result in a new injury. At first, the woman visited her mother twice a day, and by the time the New Year holidays approached, she was practically exhausted. Traffic jams took up so much time that only a few pitiful hours were left for sleep. The woman turned to her husband. "Husband, let's have Mom stay with us for a while. At least I won't have to rush between apartments." The man grew somber, and after a heavy pause replied, "Wife, I think the world of your mother. She's a wonderful woman, but forgive me, I'll be direct. We simply have nowhere to put her here. As you know, we have a studio apartment. The room is large in terms of square footage, but it's only one. When I tried to persuade you to take out a mortgage, I didn't find understanding. Both you and your mother were against it. Husband, couldn't we put up some kind of screen? It would be like 2 rooms. Listen, it would be uncomfortable for your mother first and foremost. I play computer games loudly. I listen to music until late. Besides, ask her yourself if she'd agree to move. I can say with 100% certainty that she'll say no. Your mother is very tactful and wise and understands that the further away she lives, the better her relationship with her son-in-law will be." The husband was right. Her mother, upon hearing the idea of moving into her son-in-law and daughter's apartment, only snorted indignantly. "There can't even be a conversation about it. Home is where the heart is. I won't come to you, especially since it would be inconvenient to be sick there quietly." The daughter submitted to her mother's will, and she didn't want to argue with her husband at all. She continued to spend time stuck in traffic, and she had to leave her lawyer position at the boss's firm. With the boss's permission, the woman transferred to part-time work and was very glad that the boss had been able to accommodate her. She prepared contracts during visits, trained her successor, and diligently performed all duties that didn't require constant presence in the office. However, rehabilitation cost significantly more money than the woman could have imagined. Sometimes she shared her indignation with her husband about pharmacies changing prices at will and trying to sell the most expensive version of medication. And then her husband would grumble, "Listen, wife, shouldn't your mother be provided with some free medications?" The woman tried not to answer this. After all, the family budget wasn't suffering, and she hadn't asked her husband for money in the almost 6 months since the fateful news of her mother's troubles. The woman generally tried to handle this situation herself without involving her husband. The weather changed, but the woman's schedule, by established tradition, remained almost unchanged. In the morning, she prepared breakfast for her husband and, if she had time, prepared ingredients for lunch and dinner. Then, packing some of the breakfast into a container, she rushed to her mother's, stopping at the store and pharmacies along the way. Care, maintaining morale, and helping with movement around the apartment took up a lot of time. Then the woman would stop by the office and rush home by evening. In case of any emergencies, her mother's neighbour had a key to the apartment, the very one who had helped her wait for the ambulance. She sometimes dropped by for a visit to watch television together and gossip about something, so her mother couldn't be called abandoned. But the woman desperately wanted to get her mother back on her feet sooner, and not just because she had to spend a huge amount of time on daily, non-stop, non-holiday trips between quite distant parts of the city. It was simply that her mother was the closest person to her. She had, in essence, given the woman life twice, the first time on her 38th birthday, but most importantly, later, when a terrible tragedy struck her like a terrible avalanche. It was her mother who was there during those dark days, helping her move when her legs almost gave out from nervous strain, forcing her to drink and eat with persuasion, sometimes against her will. Giving up her well-paying, undemanding job, her mother sold her apartment in their hometown, and practically like a huge, unwieldy bundle, moved her 2,000 kilometers away from the place where everything reminded the woman of her inhuman grief. It was her mother who made her get a job where it was almost impossible to be alone with her sad thoughts, where she had to look stylish and fit. The woman didn't consider her help to her mother a self-sacrifice and, despite her fatigue, tried to surround her husband with care as well. Especially since their 10th wedding anniversary was approaching, and she wanted to arrange a touching congratulation and a pleasant surprise for her patient husband. She had already drafted a preliminary menu, found a confectionery that made custom cakes, and arranged for an unusual shaped cake for her husband, who adored sweets. The holiday was approaching, but shortly before it arrived, her husband warned her during breakfast one morning. "Forgive me, wife, I need the car for a few days. I have to go to the branch in the neighbouring region. It seems the branch manager there is messing with the reports. Profits have dropped significantly, although everything is stable in other divisions, and some are even seeing growth. I'll try to be quick, of course, but planes probably won't fly to those parts, and I really don't fancy going by train. Can you manage without the car?" Although the woman herself was counting on their reliable family vehicle, she didn't argue. After all, her husband really needed the car more. She smiled. Of course I can manage. Her husband politely thanked her for breakfast and promised, It's all right, we'll buy you a metal horse too. Things will normalize at work a bit, and you can choose a model. Running out of the house, the man kissed his wife on the cheek, winked and said, Don't worry, I remember our anniversary. I'll try to be back by Friday evening. Taking advantage of her husband's absence, the woman moved in with her mother for a while to save time on travel. During these few days, she managed to do a thorough cleaning, and the apartment felt somehow especially fresh, like spring. Only on the eve of the holiday did she have to return home to bring an urgently needed diploma to the office. However, this was even convenient because she also needed to tidy up at home and prepare some of her husband's favourite salads. In the morning, the woman, taking the holiday treats she had set aside in separate containers, rushed to her mother's again. She habitually gave her a massage, helped her walk around the room, and, even waiting for the elevator repair to finish, finally took her mother outside. This was done so that she could enjoy the good weather and savour the feeling that life was returning to what it was before the injury. After a short walk, mother and daughter had lunch, and the daughter began to apologise. Mum, please forgive me. I'm leaving a little earlier today. I want to prepare a surprise for my husband. If you get tired of the TV, your keys, your phone is charged. If anything happens, call. Okay, run along, my dear. Happy holiday to you and your husband. Imagine 10 years together already. Kissing her mother, the woman hurried along her pre-planned route. Spring, which had long been in full swing and was rapidly approaching summer, offered gentle warmth, and the sweet tart scent of blooming lilacs set a most romantic mood. Contrary to the popular belief that marrying in May brings trouble, she had not had to suffer in her second marriage. On the contrary, her husband was a quiet harbour for the woman. There were no stormy passions between them, but there was mutual affection and respect. The woman valued her husband for not prying into her soul, not tormenting her with jealousy and suspicion, and not demanding that she bear him an heir or heiress. Even when he first declared his serious intentions, she had told him directly and honestly that children were absolutely not in her plans. This statement did not scare the man. A few years after the wedding, her husband asked if she had changed her mind about having a child, but upon hearing a categorical no, he did not inquire about the reasons and never brought up the topic again. The man was a good partner, and of course she loved him in her own way, with all the strength her wounded heart was capable of. Following the list she had made the day before, the woman bought drinks, got the squid her husband adored, and bought various small items, a crispy baguette, fresh green salad, fruits. Gradually, 2 large shopping bags, which the woman had thoughtfully brought with her, filled up. Hanging them on both shoulders, she stopped by the confectionery where she had ordered the cake. Now she could go home. Approaching the entrance, the woman looked hopefully at their family parking spot and sighed with relief. The car wasn't there. That meant she would have time to set the table, hang balloons, and get dressed before her husband returned. Mentally praising herself for the convenient bags that left one hand free, the woman, hastily opening the door, finally found herself in their family nest. Setting the cake box on the bench, she suddenly froze in surprise. A foreign sound coming from the kitchen brazenly intruded into the familiar hum of the apartment building. Strange. There were no unfamiliar shoes on the mat, no strange things were visible, but the clinking of dishes reached her quite clearly, as if someone were moving a heavy plate or a large mug. The husband and wife didn't keep pets. They had always wanted to get a nice dog, but the misfortune with Mom had adjusted that plan. Perhaps it would have been much wiser to go out onto the landing, close the door, and call her husband. But from exhaustion, the woman didn't act as safety dictated. Automatically slipping off her sneakers and with the bag still on her shoulders, she entered the kitchen and almost collapsed in surprise. Sitting on a chair, with one leg tucked under him, was a boy who looked about 6 years old. The unknown little guest was completely engrossed in eating. On the table before him stood her husband's enormous mug, a bottle of water, and a large, deep plate into which the woman had assembled a layered salad the evening before so it would have time to soak. A spoon sticking out from the side clearly indicated that the dish had already been unceremoniously sampled. The child was biting into a stick of smoked sausage with appetite, and the woman, overwhelmed by memories, felt her heart ache. It was too painful to act rationally. For a few seconds the woman even thought that she was hallucinating due to overwork or some other reason. However, the vision was too realistic, the sound, the image, and even the aroma of the sausage. The engrossed boy only tore himself away from his tasty activity after the woman, her voice a little hoarse from nervous shock, attracted his attention with a question. "Hey, hi, who are you? And what are you doing here?" The boy jumped up from the chair and, without letting go of the sausage, reported, "My name is Jamie. Uncle Charlie brought me here and told me to wait for him. He said I could eat whatever I wanted, so I'm eating. The sausage is tasty, but very salty." It didn't even occur to the woman that the person the boy called Uncle Charlie wasn't her husband. Such an incredible coincidence, like in a traditional New Year's movie where the hero didn't realize he had opened someone else's apartment with his keys and was completely unfazed by the typical setting of a standard apartment, simply couldn't happen. The woman could confidently vouch that it would be difficult to find a design even remotely similar to theirs. Of course, there must be a logical explanation for the boy's appearance in the kitchen, the woman thought. She herself had married her husband in the spring, and the surname Smirnov meant absolutely nothing to her. Her husband was an only child, but as far as she knew, he had cousins. However, they hadn't been invited to their modest wedding, and she didn't know them not only by face, but also by surname. So it was entirely possible that Jamie sitting before her was the child of one of her husband's cousins. But why had he brought this boy to their apartment without even warning her? Knocked out of her psychological equilibrium, the woman couldn't concentrate. Her thoughts were muddled, and she hadn't even managed to come up with any plausible version when her husband called. Coming out of her stupor, she finally took the bags off her shoulders and answered the call. The man spoke quickly, literally not allowing his wife to get a word in. "My love, we just missed each other by a little bit. I just left your mother's apartment and I'll be there in literally 20 minutes and explain everything. For now, set the table." The bewildered woman felt a little better and replied briefly, "Okay." She very clearly felt the boy's gaze on her, but couldn't bring herself to look into his eyes. The woman brought her new flip-flops from the hallway, which she had just bought in anticipation of the approaching summer season, and offered, "Jamie, it's hot indoors in sneakers. Here, take these slippers, put them on. It will be more comfortable and convenient." The child silently obeyed. To ease the tension and occupy the boy who had been thrust upon her while avoiding the need to interact with him much, the woman asked, "Jamie, do you know how to inflate balloons?" The boy nodded. The woman quickly went to the room, brought the child a whole package, and opened it. Then, obeying some impulse, she rinsed the tips through which Jamie was to inflate the balloons and handed them over, asking, don't inflate them too much. When you get tired, rest, and I'll help you tie them. Agreed?" The child nodded busily and, without any embarrassment, asked, "Is your name Sandy?" The woman shrugged. "My name can be changed in different ways. Sandy and Shura and Sasha." Jamie's eyes widened in surprise. "But that's what boys are called. Are you like a guy?" The woman chuckled. "No, I'm not a guy. It's just a versatile name, like Jean or Val." Silence fell in the kitchen. The boy, lost in thought, occupied himself with the balloons. The woman, watching her guest out of the corner of her eye, began to unpack the bags, prepare what she had planned, and gradually set the table. She put the cake in the refrigerator, and interrupting herself to tie the balloons Jamie had inflated, felt not annoyance, but a gnawing pain. She wasn't angry with her husband, but all sorts of thoughts kept swirling in her head. The woman felt the curious gaze of the little guest on her, but didn't dare to look him in the eyes. So they watched each other but barely communicated. Amidst the hustle, the woman didn't even notice her husband enter the kitchen with a huge bouquet of roses in his hands and a large bag. The man set his load on the floor and handed his wife the flowers. "Wife, congratulations to you and me on our holiday. I see you've already met Jamie, made friends. Simply wonderful." "Well then, let's celebrate." The boy, noticeably cheered up after the husband's arrival, said modestly, "Congratulations." And when everyone sat down at the table after the inevitable fuss, he boasted loudly, "Uncle Charlie, I inflated the balloons myself, and Sandy helped me tie them. We prepared a good surprise for you." The adult man mumbled something indistinct in response to the little guest's chatter, praising Jamie and his wife, who hadn't even touched the food. There was tension in the apartment, and the husband set about fixing the situation. He quietly turned on music and began enthusiastically praising the dishes his wife had prepared. Then he proposed a toast to his wife's beauty and charm, took a small box from his pocket, handed it to her, and said, "Congratulations, I hope you like it." The woman, confused by assumptions and thoughts about why her husband had brought the child into the apartment, only just remembered her own gift. Briefly leaving the not-so-cheerful company, she, clutching the unopened box in her hand, took out the hidden present. Returning to the table, she handed her husband the package and limited herself to a terse phrase, "Happy tin anniversary." Her husband, hastily tearing open the wrapping paper, began loudly admiring the tin flask and started showing the gift he had received to Jamie. The woman felt uncomfortable and again sank into her thoughts. This was not at all how she had imagined celebrating their wedding anniversary. She had wanted to prepare a surprise, but her husband had managed not just to surprise her, but to completely throw her off balance. Unexpected things again. The woman coughed violently, choking on mineral water, when she heard the question addressed to her. "Wife, little Jamie will stay with us for a couple of weeks, okay?" The woman was silent, not knowing what to say. Her husband tried to justify himself. "I stopped by your mother's to pick you up. On the way home, I wanted to explain everything to you, but I didn't have time, and this is the surprise that turned out. Forgive me for not thinking to warn you, but I was sure I would find you at Mom's and would warn you on the way that we had a guest." The husband's monologue ended in a prolonged silence. The woman moved food around on her plate with a fork, not looking up at her husband. He, flustered, also didn't know what else to say in his defense. With childlike spontaneity, Jamie broke the silence, asking loudly, "Aunt Sandy, thank you, I've already eaten. Can I try the cake now?" The boy showed his empty plate. With a stony face, the woman got up from her chair and went to the refrigerator. She wanted to scream, stomp her feet, sob, and break the dishes, stained, like her faith in her husband's honesty. She knew it wouldn't make things easier. The most likely explanation for her husband bringing Jamie into the apartment seemed to be the version about her husband's infidelity. With her whole being, the woman now hated the man she had loved for 10 years as much as she knew how. Her husband, who knew his wife well, guessed from her abrupt movements that in a little while she would directly say everything that was on her mind. He decided to lead the little guest away from the table to the relaxation area, where he could be distracted from the serious conversation between the adults that was about to take place. "Jamie, come on, I'll turn on the game console for you. The games are mostly difficult though, but we can find something you like online, or I'll put on cartoons if you want." "Will I be able to eat the cake?" the boy asked with interest. "Of course you can have everything there." The boy's eyes sparkled. He trustingly followed the owner of the apartment to the cozy, soft corner. The woman, who had heard her husband and the guest talking, cut a large piece of cake, carefully placed it on a plate, turned on the electric kettle, and watched intently as it boiled. The click of it turning off brought her out of her reverie. Having brewed the tea, the woman placed a cup with the tasty drink, a sugar bowl with a spoon, and the plate with the cake on a tray, and then carried it to the table near the apartment's gaming area. Her husband was showing Jamie his collection of computer games, but the boy, who was clearly well-mannered, tore himself away from the fascinating activity and thanked him. "Thank you very much." The woman nodded and, turning sharply, left. When her husband came into the kitchen, he found a strange scene. The woman was sitting on the floor, holding dirty children's sneakers, and tears were streaming down her cheeks. The man tried to joke, "Hey, wife, what's wrong? Big deal, a child came into the kitchen in dirty shoes." "We'll turn on the robot vacuum cleaner. Let it work. It's no trouble at all." Is it really worth getting upset over a little bit of dust? Especially since it's a holiday today. The woman looked at her husband in such a way that he became uncomfortable and quietly said, "Husband, I think I've told you repeatedly that I don't want to be in the same space with children for long periods. It's beyond my strength. Perhaps there were significant circumstances behind your action, or as you put it, surprise, and you can be understood. Only, forgive me, I have absolutely no desire to deal with explanations today. Now I'm going to Mom's and we'll just..." Her husband couldn't understand the reason for his wife's categorical decision, but saw perfectly well that she was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Therefore he suggested, "Wife, I truly am very much to blame for not warning you, but I can explain everything. I think that when you listen to me, you'll understand that I simply couldn't have acted differently. I'll wait until you're ready to talk." The woman unexpectedly gently placed the children's sneakers on the floor, wiped the tears from her cheeks with the back of her hand, and went towards the door as if she hadn't heard her husband. Her husband took his wife's hand and asked, "Wife, wait a minute. I'll call a taxi to your mother's house so I don't have to worry about you." The woman nodded and was soon riding in the car, fidgeting with the strap of her innocent handbag. The road was clear, and the journey to her mother's house took much less time than during peak hours. As soon as she opened the door, she heard, "Neighbour, come in, dear. I'm not feeling very well." The woman closed the door behind her and, taking off her shoes, went into her mother's bedroom. Her mother became agitated upon seeing her daughter. "My dear, why are you back? Didn't your husband come home? By my calculations, your anniversary celebration should be in full swing. And yet you're here for some reason. My dear, what happened?" The woman went to her mother's bed, sat down on the floor, and resting her head against her mother's hand, recounted everything that had happened from the moment she returned home and saw Jamie there. Finishing her story, she voiced her assumption. "Mum, I'm almost certain that Jamie is my husband's illegitimate son. The boy looks about 6 years old, which means my husband was cheating on me and even had the audacity to present me with proof of his infidelity right on our wedding anniversary. Her mother tried to comfort her daughter. I'm sure your husband can explain everything. I feel that he loves you. Believe my experience, he would hardly risk his relationship with you and cheat. However, Sandy cried without stopping. The woman stroked her daughter, who was so grown up yet defenseless and sobbing, but didn't say another word, because all words were powerless. Finally, when the flood of tears subsided, the woman silently got up from the floor and went to wash her face, swollen from crying. The woman felt completely drained. Returning to her mother's room, she confessed, "I'm very tired today. Do you mind if I lie down?" Her mother didn't object or suggest, for example, talking more or having dinner. She understood that her unhappy daughter needed to rest. "Of course, my dear, but let's both take some sedative, maybe valerian drops or something. It will be good for both of us." The woman fulfilled her mother's request and went to sleep. The nervous tension was so strong that she passed out and woke up when it was 10 in the morning. Jumping up from the sofa, the woman rushed to the kitchen, where she found her mother mixing pancake batter. "Good morning, my dear. You're just in time. We'll have breakfast now." With 4 hands, the women made pancakes and, as if by agreement, didn't say a word about yesterday's situation. While the woman was washing the dishes, her mother asked, "My dear, please go to the theatre with the neighbour. She has 2 tickets for a very good play, excellent seats in the stalls." Her niece gave them to her for her birthday. They were supposed to go together, and wouldn't you know it, the niece got sick and the other relatives can't keep the neighbour company. Some are called by their garden plots, some are flying on business trips. In short, the ticket is going to waste. It's a pity. The woman shook her head. "Mum, I don't want to go anywhere. I'm not in the mood at all." However, if her mother had something in mind, she knew how to insist. "That's exactly why you should go, because you're not in the mood. Art is excellent at switching thoughts in your head and changing emotions. Please, my dear, not for the sake of the wasted ticket, but for my sake." Although the woman had to submit to her mother's wish, she categorically refused the offer to stop by the hairdresser beforehand for a new haircut. After waiting for the neighbour to take her daughter, her mother called her son-in-law and said in an almost commanding tone, "Husband, your wife will be gone for about 3 hours. Come over, we need to talk." The man didn't resist, but warned, "Mother, I'll definitely come, but I have no one to leave Jamie with. I suppose I could find a hired nanny, but I wouldn't trust the boy to just anyone. So I can only come with him. Do you mind?" The woman sighed. "I don't mind." "Excellent. Then I'll be at your place with Jamie in half an hour." 30 minutes later, her mother, carefully walking to the door, leaning on her sturdy walker, let her husband and Jamie into the apartment. The man introduced the child, and the boy politely said hello. The hostess tried not to show her incredible anxiety and hospitably invited Jamie into the kitchen. "Come in, I have a television there and pastries are waiting for you. Would you like cocoa or tea?" The child announced that coffee was the most delicious for him, but children shouldn't drink it often, and he would have tea because he was too grown up for cocoa. Out of surprise, her mother almost laughed, but she quickly got her emotions under control and, turning to her husband, asked, "Can I treat Jamie to a chicory drink then? It's almost like coffee." The boy was delighted. "I want to try this chicory. Uncle Charlie, can I?" The husband agreed, and when the hostess deftly managed to prepare the treat for Jamie, the man handed the boy his smartphone and explained, "I need to talk to your mother. Please stay here, eat your treat, play on the phone, maybe even watch some videos online, okay?" "Of course, Uncle Charlie. I'm perfectly fine unsupervised. Don't worry." Watching this scene, her mother could barely hold back tears, and, hiding her emotions, she slowly began to walk towards the room that was old-fashionedly called the living room. Her husband followed behind her, eager to find out what his mother wanted to talk to him about. The woman settled into an armchair, and the man sat on the sofa diagonally across from her so they could talk comfortably. The hostess watched her son-in-law intently, but he didn't wait long and asked without preamble, "Mother, explain to me why my wife reacted so inappropriately to Jamie's appearance in our apartment. I admit part of the blame is mine for not warning her, but we are adults. Instead of talking calmly, she practically just ran away to you. Is that normal?" The woman didn't interrupt her son-in-law's indignant speech, but she wasn't in a hurry to answer his question, instead asking a counter-question. "Before we start a difficult conversation to try and help my daughter save her family, I need to be sure that there is meaning in this. Just tell me honestly, is Jamie your illegitimate son?" The man's indignation knew no bounds. "No, of course not. I never even thought of cheating on my wife. I love and respect her very much. My attitude towards children is starting to scare me. Jamie ended up in our apartment because of a desperate situation. My wife didn't even try to get along with him, although, as you probably noticed, he's a very well-behaved, smart, and charming boy." Her husband's answer calmed the agitated woman, and taking a deep breath, as if preparing to parachute, she decided to tell the truth. "Well, as they say, everything secret becomes known. As her husband, you have the right to know why my daughter avoids contact with children. I think I have the right to tell you her story, which at first seemed like a happy fairy tale, and then turned into a terrible nightmare that destroyed her usual life. My daughter grew up a wonderful and intelligent girl. She was a true joy to me and my husband. We easily arranged for her to study at one of the best gymnasiums in our city. Our family's prosperity and the positions my husband and I held allowed our daughter to fit in among what they call the golden youth. However, the gymnasium had a very strong teaching staff, and grades weren't for sale, as you might have thought. They knew how to get the children interested in studying, and our daughter was one of the best students in the class. They even made her a kind of mentor for her desk mate. The boy was from a very good family, quite influential in our city. It's no joke, his father was the regional prosecutor, and his mother held a significant position in the same department. In short, they lived better than our family, but they didn't hinder the friendship between their son and daughter. They welcomed her quite sincerely, and they spoke to me and my husband kindly, not condescendingly. When my daughter was in the 10th grade, her father died suddenly. A blood clot, as the autopsy showed. It was Zachary's family who supported me and Sandy after this loss. I'm still grateful to them for that, because I was in such a state that I almost followed my husband. So, of course, I didn't object at all when Sandy decided to marry Zachary. So what if she was just over 18 at that moment? It was obvious that true feelings shouldn't be stood in the way of. Zachary's parents also didn't object and were even happy that my daughter became part of their family. A year after the wedding, my daughter and Zachary had twins, 2 boys. They grew up healthy, cheerful, and strong, and brought joy to all of us. My daughter couldn't get enough of her children. You know, husband, she told me that she'd be walking, pushing the stroller, and her heart would feel like it was about to burst from happiness. Of course, I helped whenever I could. Her mother-in-law repeatedly suggested that my daughter hire a reliable nanny, but my daughter refused every time, and she mostly managed on her own. God knows what it cost her, but she didn't drop out of university and even managed without taking an academic leave. And her father-in-law got her a prestigious, well-paying job in a position where the working day was strictly regulated and there was a social package and other benefits. He, of course, had such an opportunity, and there was no shame in giving his daughter-in-law a leg up. My daughter was certainly intelligent. The boys were 6 years old when my daughter became pregnant again. Zachary greeted the news joyfully, and why would he be upset? The family relationships were wonderful. As far as I know, there wasn't a single quarrel between them, as if two halves were lucky enough to unite into one whole. I know many were envious, and some women tried to start a romance with Zachary, but he didn't need anyone but my daughter. Everything was so perfect that there wasn't even a thought that everything would collapse overnight due to a terrible tragedy. My daughter had to go to the doctor, and Zachary volunteered to pick up the boys from kindergarten himself. By a ridiculous coincidence, his car broke down that day, and he decided not to call a taxi, but to walk the children home through the park. The weather was wonderful, and although the rides weren't working yet, there was a pizzeria at the park exit that the boys were all eager to go to. On the way, Zachary met a friend, and while he was talking to him, the children, getting playful, ran out onto the lake. But the March ice turned out to be treacherously thin. My grandsons, as witnesses later recounted, didn't even have time to cry out. They went under the water in an instant. Zachary and his friend rushed to the water, but they were only able to pull the boys out when the divers arrived at the scene of the tragedy. Zachary later tried to justify himself, repeating over and over like a broken record that he was only distracted for a few seconds. But what was the point? Our boys drowned. It couldn't be undone. Zachary was the first to tell me this bitter news, because he was worried about Alexandra, and not without reason. I went to the private clinic where I knew my daughter was at the time. My heart told me it was better if doctors were nearby when the terrible grief struck my daughter. Seeing me in the corridor, Sandy must have understood everything from my face. After the news of what had happened, she had a hysterical fit. It was impossible to calm my daughter down even with a large dose of medication. She didn't make it home that evening, ending up in the hospital with a nervous breakdown. From the grief over her deceased sons, my daughter was unable to save the baby she was carrying. The doctors didn't even consider him a child yet, but she had already lost him. At little Allie and little Johnny's funeral, Sandy stood like a stone statue, without tears, without emotion, pale as death. The emptiness in her eyes was especially terrifying. Zachary grieved no less, his hair turning grey at 25. He tried to take his daughter's hand to support her, but she recoiled from him as if from a leper. She never crossed the threshold of the apartment where she had lived with her husband and sons again. How many times Zachary tried to talk to her I can't count, but it never worked. My daughter simply erased her husband from her life. Zachary's mother came to us, understanding that my daughter didn't want to see or hear her husband. She knelt, begging for her son's forgiveness, saying that he had become unlike himself, sharing sad thoughts that he was on the verge and might leave this world. But Alexandra didn't react at all. She could never forgive her husband for the death of their sons. Zachary couldn't forgive himself either. He truly turned from a thriving man into a pale imitation of his former self. Sandy predictably quit her job, ostensibly voluntarily, but in reality, everyone understood that she simply couldn't be under constant public scrutiny. Moreover, an unusual and unexpected problem arose. Her daughter would almost have a hysterical fit if she went outside and saw a child. She changed her route, but it's absolutely impossible to completely avoid the possibility of meeting children. One day, Sandy and I were in the elevator, and a neighbour with a little girl came in with us. Everything seemed fine, but I became anxious. After our fellow passengers got out of the cabin, I looked at my daughter and saw blood running down her chin. She had bitten her lip so hard, trying to suppress a hysterical attack. After this incident, my daughter stayed at home for almost a month, day and night. I even called a special doctor, the best of the best, to the house. There were changes, but they weren't fast and not at all positive. After a period of apathy, my daughter became aggressive. She seemed to have an obsession, and the medication prescribed by the doctor couldn't cope with it for long. Sandy would take the pills, fall into a state of indifference to everything for a few hours, and then start agonizingly thinking about something, pacing back and forth in the room. Once I saw her searching for poisons online, and I was genuinely scared. I realized that my daughter had decided to deal with the involuntary culprit of her children's death. I tried to be constantly by her side, watching over my daughter so she wouldn't do anything irreparable. One day, Sandy managed to leave the house in the morning while I was asleep. Friends later told me that she had ambushed Zachary near his work and attacked him with her fists, shouting, "Why are you alive when our sons aren't?" I don't know, maybe my friends exaggerated, but supposedly 4 strong men could barely pull her away from the bewildered Zachary. He didn't even resist. When I came to pick her up, my daughter was sitting in a back room where the smell of hated Corvalol and some other medications hung in the air, and she barely reacted to anything. They told me an ambulance had come and sedated Sandy. Among friends and neighbours, of course, all the talk was only about the accident with my grandsons and about Alexandra going mad with grief. One day, Zachary's father called me and strongly asked me to leave the city with my daughter. You don't refuse people like him. Besides, I myself was thinking about how to hide my daughter from memories, from sympathetic and curious glances. I quit my job, sold the apartment. Again, thanks to my son-in-law's parents, I managed to do it quickly and at a quite adequate price, considering the urgency. Sandy and Zachary got divorced in absentia, again thanks to his relatives. My daughter didn't even have to go anywhere. In the end, we moved to this city, far away from everything that had been. Well, and then you yourself, Yaroslav, know. You met her, and my daughter started to return to life. Don't think my daughter hates children, it's just that she's still in pain. She even refuses the possibility of becoming a mother again because of the fear of repeating the nightmare she went through. Her mother fell silent. Telling her daughter's terrible story, the woman was morally exhausted. Her husband noticed how pale her face had become and hurried to the kitchen to bring her water. Jamie was engrossed in playing on the phone, and the man, stroking his head, filled a glass and returned to the living room to his mother. "Forgive me for making you remember everything." The woman, carefully drinking the water, said bitterly, "Oh, husband, if only it were possible to forget this at all. Perhaps you should have known about my daughter's past sooner. I could never bring myself to tell all this out loud. My daughter, as I understand it, still can't talk about it either." The man looked at the woman in confusion and admitted, "Honestly, I couldn't even imagine that such a tragedy could be hidden behind my wife's unwillingness to become a mother. I thought she probably didn't want to ruin her figure." It's hard to even imagine the feelings she had when she saw Jamie in our kitchen. What a surprise I managed to create, right on our wedding anniversary. How can I ask my wife for forgiveness now so she'll understand me? I truly had nowhere to bring Jamie, and for several reasons, the boy needed to be sheltered for a week or two in a well-equipped and secure place where his parents' enemies wouldn't even think of looking. It all happened practically by chance. I arrived at the branch and ran into an old friend on the street whom I hadn't seen since demobilization. Vic is more than a friend to me, only thanks to him I survived the army, but that's a long story. And in civilian life, life took us to our hometowns, and, as happens, we lost touch. I tried to find him on social media somehow. Maybe I should have searched more persistently, then I would have found him. Well, I got caught up building my career. In short, we hadn't seen each other for about 15 years, and here I meet Victor in a city that's foreign to both of us. He had changed, of course, over the years, but I recognized him immediately. He almost walked past me without noticing, but I stopped him. It turned out that Vic had come to solve problems for his sister and her husband. They got involved in a lawsuit with some not-so-reasonable people who were used to doing things in a criminal way. Vic was most worried about Jamie, his nephew. He explained to his sister that just in case, as a precaution, the child needed to be hidden, because these bandits could easily influence the outcome in their favor through him. But they couldn't come up with a reliable place. And then I appeared out of nowhere. Vic's idea of taking Jamie out of the city seemed like an ideal option. Indeed, there were practically no leads that could lead the bandits to the child's trail. It's also good that the boy has a strong character, growing up to be a real man. His parents and Vic told him that he needed to stay with me for a little while, and he accepted this news calmly. I picked him up like in a detective story, so as not to fall under the city surveillance cameras. We agreed with Vic to contact each other in a week, and he was supposed to call me himself when the issue was resolved. Jamie, of course, is simply an ideal boy. He settled into the unfamiliar place easily and even put himself to bed after brushing his teeth beforehand. All that's left is to wait for a call from Vic. It's very easy for me to communicate with Jamie, but I have work on Monday and I can hardly take him with me. Now I don't even know what to do. The husband fell silent, and then, unexpectedly for him and his mother, the woman's voice was heard. "Nothing special. You'll go to work as usual, and I'll stay with Jamie. Just leave me the car so I don't have to drag the boy on public transport to Mom's and back." It turned out that, contrary to her mother's calculations, her daughter had already returned from the theatre, and, it seemed, had heard some part of her husband's story. To her mother's preemptive question, the daughter explained, "I couldn't watch the play at the theatre. I went to the restroom, washed my face, and realized I couldn't go back and stare at the stage without even trying to understand the plot. I typed a message to the neighbor apologizing and came here. It turned out I came back just in time. Perhaps I needed to hear this story about Jamie from the outside, because, forgive me, husband, I suspected you of cheating. I would hardly have believed it if you had told me all this yesterday. Today I can look at this situation more rationally. Mum, you don't mind if I visit you with Jamie, do you?" The woman, trying not to scare away the changes in her daughter's attitude towards children, spoke very cautiously. "Of course, come visit." Her mother wanted to add something else, but her eyes betrayed her, stinging with tears, and she decided to change the subject. "My dear husband, aren't you hungry? I could eat something right now. Let's go to the kitchen. Besides, we need to see how Jamie is doing, if he's bored, because I completely forgot about the rules of hospitality." The boy, seeing the woman, didn't forget to say hello to her, and her voice trembled slightly as she returned his greeting. Her husband, who now understood the reason for his wife's strange behavior, was amazed by her resilience. Having gone through such a life trial, she had managed to endure and never tried to appeal to his pity or evoke sympathy by recounting what she had faced. The woman gently but persistently declined her mother's attempts to feed everyone who had gathered in her kitchen that evening. "Thank you, Mom, for everything, but we should probably go home. I'll stop by tomorrow closer to lunchtime." Her husband, realizing he had been forgiven by his wife, was very happy and warmly said goodbye to her mother, promising, "We'll all visit you together tomorrow. If you're feeling up to it and the weather is warm, we can go out into nature. How does that sound?" Wonderful, husband. Let's not plan too far ahead. After saying goodbye to the hostess, the woman, her husband, and Jamie set off for the other end of the city. The man got behind the wheel and saw in the mirror how carefully his wife fastened the boy's seatbelt. It was obvious that for the woman, this was an absolutely natural gesture, once perfected to automaticity. She was clearly a tender, caring mother, loved her children very much, and after the misfortune that befell her, suffered in a way one wouldn't wish on their worst enemy. Carefully parking the car near the entrance, the man carried the sleeping Jamie to the apartment in his arms. The woman smoothed the crumpled sheet on the sofa, carefully took off the boy's shoes, and covered him with a blanket. Watching his wife, the husband felt incredible tenderness towards her. Unexpectedly, his beloved wife revealed an unfamiliar side of her personality. He realized he had made the absolutely right choice. Later, they, having closed the kitchen door, drank tea with the leftover cake and, as if there had been no wall of misunderstanding between them yesterday, planned their Sunday schedule with jokes and kisses. The man finally decided to bring up the unpleasant topic and confessed, "Wife, I'm a real idiot. I almost ruined everything with my actions, and I want to thank you very much for your understanding." His wife smiled. "Well, to be honest, I also overreacted. So I suggest we forget about it. Let's move on." The day off passed cheerfully, and even better than the couple had anticipated. They managed to persuade her mother to come out for a walk, and she was much less happy about the sunny May day than about her daughter's joyful eyes. The woman gladly answered Jamie's questions, and also constantly watched to make sure he wasn't in danger. However, neither her mother nor her husband dared to make remarks or reproach her for being overprotective. Jamie, it seemed, didn't pay any attention at all to being surrounded by maximum care. By agreement with Alexandra, he called her by her name, not using the word aunt, and seemed quite satisfied with his unexpected trip. After taking her mother home after their outing, the trio lingered because there was simply no chance of leaving the woman's place unfed. However, no one objected. Late in the evening, as the woman was tucking Jamie into bed, the boy quietly asked her, "Do you think my parents are okay? Will I see them soon?" Trying to make her voice sound firm and convincing, the woman replied, "Of course they are fine. They'll finish all their business very soon, and you'll meet." The calmed boy fell asleep. The woman, afraid of waking the child, beckoned her husband to the kitchen and began to question him about the situation Jamie's parents were involved in. "Wife, honestly, I don't even know all the details. Vic gave me a very brief overview, but I understood that some real thugs had indeed targeted his sister and her husband." The woman began to clarify, asking questions that were unexpected for her husband. "Are these bandits from the city you went to, or are they outsiders? Did they call each other by any nicknames?" Her husband told her everything he knew, but the information obtained was insufficient, and she suddenly asked, "Can you contact Victor urgently? I need to get some clarifications from him to try and help Jamie's parents. Of course, he's fine here and quite comfortable, I hope, but it shouldn't be that a mother and son are separated for a long time." It was impossible to tell from the woman's voice how deeply she had taken Jamie's and his parents' situation to heart. But now, knowing his wife's past, her husband understood how difficult it was for her. "Actually, Vic gave me a password for a chat in case of such a situation, where all messages automatically disappear. I think I can try to contact him." The man opened the necessary website, entered the information he had memorized at his army friend's request, and a few minutes later exclaimed joyfully, "It worked! Vic greeted me." The woman thoughtfully advised, "Husband, ask him a question. the answer to which will let you know for sure if it's your friend you're talking to, and if there's even the slightest doubt, immediately close the site and take the SIM card out of your phone. Alarmed by his wife's suspicions, the husband quickly typed a few phrases and impatiently awaited an answer. Reading the received message, the man exhaled with relief. "Everything's fine. It's definitely Vic," he answered with our code phrase. The woman nodded and asked, "Excellent. Write to Victor that your wife will be chatting with him now and give me the phone. I'll find out everything I need from your friend myself." "Nothing surprises me anymore," her husband said, handing the smartphone to his wife. She chatted with the stranger for quite a while, then grabbed a pen, quickly copied a number onto a bread wrapper, tore off the edge of the paper with the numbers, crumpled it in her hand, and handed the phone back to her husband. "That's it. I'm going to the bathroom. I need to make a call. Write to Vic to log into this messenger in an hour. Then, I hope, I'll be able to tell him something specific." The woman left the kitchen and went to the bathroom, which had the best sound insulation in the apartment. Taking a few deep breaths, she dialed the number of her former father-in-law, which she had memorized. The phone was unavailable. The woman gathered all her willpower and dialed her former husband's number. Soon, his voice came through the receiver. "I'm listening. Don't be silent." The woman's voice was hoarse with emotion, and she replied, "Zachary, hello, it's Sandy. I need your help. More precisely, perhaps your father can resolve the situation, but I can't reach him. The robot says the phone is out of service." The man's demanding tone softened noticeably. "Sandy, I'm glad to hear from you, even if it's under such circumstances. I wish you happiness, and if you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. I'll always be happy to help. I work in the regional prosecutor's office now, so all my connections are at your service." "Thank you," the woman replied, told him everything she had learned, and dictated the number she had written down. "Okay, Sandy, I understand everything. It's not the simplest matter, but it's all solvable. I think in the end, there's a more influential force for every thug. I'll try to help. Warn this acquaintance that I'll call him tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, depending on how things turn out, from my phone, and he can feel free to answer." "Thank you, Zachary." Without waiting for her former husband's reply, the woman ended the conversation, which had been very difficult for her, and washed her face with icy water, hoping it would bring her at least some semblance of emotional balance. Even during the conversation with Zachary, she had wanted to apologize to him, but she couldn't. The bitter resentment towards the man's carelessness, which had caused her to lose her children, still burned in the woman's heart. At the same time, Sandy understood perfectly well that without the intervention of her former husband, who had extensive connections in the region, Jamie's family was practically doomed, and she wanted to protect the boy and try to save his parents. The woman sat in the bathroom for some time, regulating her heartbeat with breathing exercises. Seeing that almost an hour had passed, she returned to the kitchen to her husband and told him what Zachary had said. The man wrote the information received from his wife to his friend and hugged her tightly. He saw how his beloved wife had aged in the last hour and didn't know how to help her. He wanted to protect her from all misfortunes, but instead Sandy had to, as Yaroslav easily guessed, turn to the person who had almost completely destroyed her life. The conversation had agitated the woman. She freed herself from her husband's embrace and automatically began clearing the table, not noticing that she was throwing away food that her husband hadn't touched at all. Finally, the man caught her hand and suggested, "Drop all this fuss. It's been a difficult day and we need to rest." Even listening to her sleeping husband's peaceful breathing, the woman couldn't calm down. Before her eyes, as if in reality, the images of her little ones appeared. Here are Alex and Johnny smiling at her with toothless smiles, then going to kindergarten for the first time and, pressed against the window, waving their little hands at her, giving her cards for Mother's Day. Here, clearly having conspired, instead of falling asleep, they clap loudly and together when she starts singing them a lullaby. How many pleasant moments were there, so carefully stored somewhere far away in her memory, and how brutally everything was erased by the accident. How many times she had warned her sons not to take risks, they still didn't listen. However, what was the point of being angry now? The boys were gone, and their father was now the only hope that Jamie's mother would be able to hug him very soon. Let Zachary at least be able to help this woman, completely unknown to Sandy. Jamie stirred and began to mumble something, and the woman, slipping out from under her husband's arm, hurried to the boy. She carefully adjusted the blanket that he had almost kicked onto the floor, felt his forehead, afraid that the child had a fever, and sighed with relief, feeling that, based on her experience, everything was fine. Jamie opened his eyes, and the woman, sitting on the edge of the sofa, began quietly singing a lullaby. The boy had been asleep for a long time, but the woman remained sitting nearby, and she wanted so much for the child to return to his parents as soon as possible, and at the same time she understood that she would desperately miss interacting with him. When the sky, visible through the gap between the curtains, lightened, the woman quietly went to the kitchen to make herself coffee and work on documents, because there was no point in going back to sleep. In these dawn hours, perhaps somewhere far away, matters directly concerning Jamie's fate were being decided, but Sandy was powerless to influence anything. She had already done everything she could, overcoming deadly resentment, and now all that remained was to wait for the result. Carefully studying the papers, the woman made notes in the margins, wrote down her suggestions on a separate sheet, and, neatly putting everything into a zippered folder, began, trying not to make noise, to prepare breakfast. She had already decided to ask her boss for time off, so as not to overly tire the boy with movements to unfamiliar places. Waiting for a convenient time to send messages, the woman typed to her boss that she would send the prepared documents through her husband and began to think about what she could do to please the little guest, who, of course, was worried about the forced separation from his parents, although he tried to be brave. When her husband, showered but still yawning, looked into the kitchen, the woman had almost everything ready. She invited her husband to the table and asked, "Husband, stop by the boss's office on your way. Give him the folder with the documents from me. I've already warned him that I won't be able to come to work for a few days. If he needs to review anything, he can send it to me by email or forward it through you. In an extreme case, of course, I'll come by, but I wouldn't want to stress Jamie. I wanted to take him to Mom's and then go to a children's entertainment centre. Why should he constantly play computer games? Let him have fun, run around, so he doesn't think about sad things, because it seems he had nightmares last night." Her husband agreed with his wife's plan, and quickly finishing breakfast, thanked her and began getting ready for work. Jamie woke up much later, but the woman didn't think of waking him. She wanted the boy to feel no discomfort. The woman fed the child and then suggested, "Let's stop by my mom's for a little while and then go somewhere to have fun." A message arrived on the woman's phone, and she smiled upon seeing the notification of money being credited. Her husband had made sure his wife wouldn't have financial problems. The woman smiled and asked the boy, "Would you like to go to an amusement park with me? It's not very far from the city, and there are lots of options for fun activities. A house of mirrors, rope courses, and even a climbing wall, I think. Do you like active entertainment like that? Or maybe you prefer movies? That's no problem either. I haven't seen a movie on the big screen in ages." Jamie admitted shyly, "To be honest, I'd rather go to the amusement park." Well, then that's where we'll go. Her mother was very happy when her daughter came to her with the boy. It meant Sandy had believed her husband and hadn't acted rashly, demanding that the child be placed somewhere else. From her traumatic memories, she saw that Sandy seemed to have thawed even after a brief interaction with Jamie, and she barely made them leave as early as possible. "My dear, I feel absolutely wonderful today. Go, have fun. If anything happens, of course, I'll call, but don't worry at all, really. I feel like I even have more strength today after yesterday's walk." Turning to the boy, her mother asked, "Little Jamie, I ask you, have a good rest for yourself and for me." The boy nodded very seriously and promised, "I'll ask Sandy to take pictures and send them to you. You have a smartphone, right?" The woman smiled and praised him. "Well done. That's a great idea. Exactly. That way I'll feel like I'm having fun with you. Sandy, check if your phone is charged." The woman reassured her mother, saying she could charge her phone in the car at any time. Soon the guests left her mother, and left alone, she began to dream that her daughter would finally decide to become a mother again. It was obvious to the woman that her daughter knew how to get along wonderfully with children, but had suffered for so many years, deliberately avoiding contact with them. "May everything turn out well for my long-suffering girl," her mother prayed aloud, hoping that this request would be heard somewhere above. The woman, driving the car especially carefully, took Jamie to have fun, and felt the weight of the voluntarily assumed responsibility pressing down on her more and more. The boy first asked to go on the rope course, and the woman agreed, although at the sight of the ropes stretched high up, she wanted to grab the child in her arms and not let him go. Without taking her eyes off him, the woman watched the playful child and occasionally took photos. But she didn't dare to get distracted to send particularly expressive pictures to her mother. The woman felt that if she was distracted for even a few seconds, something bad would happen to the boy. The thought came to her mind of the degree of despair Jamie's mother must have been in to agree to give her son to a practically unknown person. Such an act could only be decided upon because of a real threat to the child's life and health. So she, Sandy, had no right to let down the woman who knew the bare minimum of information, name, surname, age, and that the unfortunate woman and her husband were involved in a situation they couldn't get out of on their own. However, Sandy, no matter how you looked at it, was in an even better position. Veronica, Jamie's mother, knew even less about the people who had sheltered her son. Monday, filled with entertainment, flew by unnoticed. The boy, tired from numerous active outdoor activities, fell asleep after a hearty dinner and rested completely calmly until morning, without crying out or waking up. The husband and wife chatted quietly in the kitchen. The woman enthusiastically talked about how bravely Jamie conquered the rides and showed photos. "Tomorrow, after visiting Mom, I want to take our guests to our museums and then go to the movies, or vice versa, whatever Jamie wants. If you can, join us. It will be fun. He's so cool and sometimes comes up with such profound thoughts. He told me today that adults deliberately try to look serious so people will be afraid of them and no one will bother them. Can you imagine?" The man agreed that there was something reasonable in this conclusion and suggested, "Wife, let's go to sleep too, like Jamie, because tomorrow, as I understand it, will be just as busy." Neither Tuesday nor Wednesday brought news from Zachary or the boy's relatives. Although the child visited various entertainment and educational places, his mood worsened with each passing day. He thought more and more often and became sad. The husband and wife understood that the boy was missing his family more and more, but they couldn't do anything about the situation. Only on Thursday, when the woman and Jamie were visiting her mother, did the long-awaited call come. Zachary informed his ex-wife that the main difficulties were already behind them and warned, "There are still some things to sort out, but those are minor. The main thing is that the boy is no longer in danger. His parents have already set off towards the city where you live now. I warned them to call you in advance when they're getting close and confirm the address. In short, I will of course see this matter through to the end. You don't need to worry." The woman sincerely thanked her ex-husband. "Thank you, Zachary, and forgive me for everything." The man's voice rang out when he replied to the woman who had caused him so much pain. "Sandy, you have no idea how happy I am to hear from you, even if it's about this. I wish you happiness, and if you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. I'll always be happy to help." The woman said goodbye to her ex-husband, and her mother, who had heard her daughter's conversation, couldn't believe her ears. It seemed her daughter had just spoken quite calmly with the man she had once loved deeply and then hated. "Mum, we need to leave. Jamie's parents are on their way, and I still need to bathe him." The child understood that he would soon see his mum and dad and started jumping around the room shouting, "Hooray!" Sandy could barely calm him down. In her joy at the successful resolution of the situation, her mother gave the boy her photograph and a collection of stamps that he had liked so much as a keepsake. "Here, little Jamie, you can look at the album and remember me." The child promised, "Thank you, but I won't forget you, Grandma, even without the stamps." Taking advantage of the moment, the woman called her husband to tell him the good news. But it turned out he already knew. "Wife, Vic has already told me that everything was resolved thanks to your help. I'm coming home by taxi now to prepare for our guests." The woman was a little sad to part with the boy who had awakened memories of the happiest days in the company of her sons, and she invited him to visit a toy store on the way. "You know, I also really want to give you something. Choose whatever you want." The boy didn't resist, but, apparently shy, he didn't spend long walking between the shelves of toys and very soon took a robot from the shelf that was far from the most expensive. On the way to the cashier, the woman put an airplane in the basket that Jamie had once talked about admiringly and a few board games. "Oh, so much!" the child exclaimed in surprise. "What a holiday today!" The woman agreed. "Yes, Jamie, today is a very big holiday." By the time the doorbell rang, the boy was freshly bathed and the table was set with cutlery. Veronica, as soon as she crossed the threshold, rushed to her son, hugging him and showering him with kisses. The boy's father handed the woman flowers, and Vic gave the husband a firm, manly hug. After Jamie took on the role of an adult and introduced his parents to the apartment owners, everyone sat down at the table. Veronica volunteered to help Sandy and confessed, "If it weren't for your kindness, I don't know how we would have managed at all. I can't express my gratitude enough. My husband and I have collected some money to compensate for Jamie's expenses and your inconvenience." Sandy paled and replied, "Veronica, please put that envelope away immediately. Don't insult me with this. Your boy will be going to school soon. Spend this money on him. And if it's not too much trouble, sometimes send my husband and me his photos. That would be the best thank you." Overwhelmed with emotion, Veronica suddenly burst into tears and hugged the woman tightly. When Jamie, concerned by how long his mom and Sandy had been gone from the table, peeked into the kitchen, he found them both in tears. With the seriousness of someone far older than his years, he asked, "What's wrong? Did you get hurt? Did something happen?" Sandy and Veronica simultaneously wiped away their tears. His mother calmed her son. "Everything is fine, darling. Everything is just wonderful." Hugging the boy, she picked him up, lifted him, and twirled him around. Sandy watched the happy people and felt no envy, but wished that all this family's troubles would be left in the past. After the guests left, the woman leaned trustingly against her husband and confessed to him, "You know, I think I'm ready for motherhood. Jamie proved to me that children are the greatest happiness." The man didn't try to dissuade his wife. Soon the woman delighted him and her mother with the news of her pregnancy. Exactly on time and without any complications, the woman gave birth to a daughter. They named the girl Victoria in honor of her husband's army friend and as a symbol of victory over the terrible memories of the past.